Good evening and welcome to the latest edition of the London Football Show Live. Over the next hour, we're going to be looking at the past week and the week ahead for all things London football. Joining me tonight, as always, is Sports Tonight TV panellist and all-round football expert, Kenny Ken. Welcome, Kenny. It's been a good week of football. It's
been a very good week of football. You know, a few disappointments over the way. A non-performance by Spurs at Old Trafford. Arsenal, you know, like I said, played well yesterday. I wanted to start by saying congratulations to Harry Kane for his first England call-up, and also congratulations for not Troy Townsend, that's his dad, Andros Townsend, for getting back in the squad. So it's a good coup for the London clubs.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. As always, if you want to get involved, you can send us a tweet. It's at LFS_live. And we may read your tweet out on the show or even invite you on to speak about your views. So we'll move on. We'll start off by going over the Premier League results over the past week for our London clubs. Actually, before we get onto the Premier League, we're going to talk about Arsenal in the Champions League this week. Now, they had a 3-1 deficit to turn around at Monaco, and unfortunately they couldn't do it, but they were close, Kenny.
The tie was decided 3 weeks ago at the Emirates in London. And even though Arsenal played very well, scored a couple of goals, got it down to 3-3, the bottom line is that the better side went through.
Now, that's 4 years in a row now that Arsenal have left at this stage. I read an interview with Arsene Wenger in a French football magazine where he said that he feels it would have been better if they had exited the Champions League, finishing third, and they could have gone on and won the Europa League. How do you feel about that?
Well, I can see where he's come from, because the situation is that he feels that if Arsenal get in the Europa League, they're going to be the best team in it. And if the Arsenal won a title in Europe, i.e. won the Europa League, it will give them confidence going into next year's Champions League. And it could show that because they've won in Europe, they can actually
But how do you feel about that as an Arsenal supporter? Because really, you're in the Champions League. Surely you expect that you can get a bit further than the last 16?
I just want to say one thing and one thing only. Arsenal do not scare anyone in Europe. Arsenal are a last 16 team. Monaco, when they got Arsenal in the Champions League, would jump out with joy because they weren't getting Chelsea. It was an easy game for Monaco, just as much as people perceived that we were going to have an easy game against Monaco ourselves.
But was that the problem in the first leg, in that Arsenal thought this is a formality almost, and until they come up against the Barças, the Real Madrids, they don't really need to make too much of an effort to get past these teams, and it's been their undoing, essentially.
Well, I totally agree with you. The bottom line is that it's Monaco physically bullied Arsenal at the Emirates. They passed the ball better. They defended better and scored more goals.
When you look at the performance on Tuesday night, Arsenal completely outplayed Monaco. Now, had they played that way in the first leg, it would have been such a straightforward...
No, it doesn't work like that. Football's not like that. Normally, if you've got a situation where you're desperate for a result, then you'll give that extra 10% in terms of performances. And especially when you play what Arsenal like to do in the Champions League is catch-up football. When you're playing catch-up football and you're desperate for a result, you're more difficult to beat, and you tend to give that more effort. But I think what happens in English clubs in Champions League, especially Arsenal, is that when they give away an away goal, they panic. And then what will happen? When they panic, you give away another goal. And then you try so hard to not, get the score back, i.e. draw 2-2. And what Arsenal did is when they were 2-1 down, rather than say, right, we've lost this game, they decided to go for 2-2. And look what happens.
And it cost them in the end. Now, that's the first time that there's no British teams left in Europe at this stage of the season since the early 90s. It's a bit worrying for British football.
It's a myth. Let me tell you something now. It's a myth. English football is not the best football in the world. English football do not have the best players. La Liga and the Bundesliga have the best players. English clubs, in fact, our European counterparts are actually learning from English clubs and are actually playing English strengths. For instance, when Chelsea, Man City and Chelsea, Man City and Arsenal played their European counterparts, they were the ones who were getting pressed. They're the ones who were getting overpowered in midfield. Even Barcelona overpowered Man City in both games. Paris Saint-Germain overpowered Chelsea. We got overpowered at the Emirates by Monaco. So all this stuff that English clubs used to do in Europe, i.e. the pressing game and power game, our European counterparts are doing that And because they've got better technique than us, they're winning the games.
This is true. Anyway, we'll move on now. Arsenal are out for another season. No doubt you'll finish fourth and get there again next year.
Well, win the FA Cup.
Right. Well, that doesn't get you into the Champions League. That's just...
I don't know, but it's silverware.
Well, small consolation. We'll move on now to the Premier League. We'll start off with Crystal Palace versus QPR. The game ended 3-1 to Crystal Palace, and Crystal Palace absolutely destroyed QPR in the first half. They were 3-0 up at half-time. It's the first time in Crystal Palace Premier League history that they scored 3 goals in the first half. What were QPR doing?
I watched quite a lot of the game, and I must admit I was absolutely outstanding at the way QPR played. To the extent they were naive. I mean, if you look at the first couple of goals, they actually came on the same side at the right back side.
But I don't know if you saw the interview of Balassi after the game, that they purposely exploited that side of the pitch because of the young QPR player.
Yeah, Darnell Furlong,
who was actually substituted at half time.
Yeah, definitely. Again, he was substituted to save himself. But again, if you look down that right, where was the protection for the guy? And Balassi basically was running off the guy, and he was basically one-on-one. You can't have a situation where you've got an inexperienced right back.
Well, what we're going to do now is we've actually got the secretary of the QPR Supporters Club, John Reid. We've got him on the phone. Are you there, John?
I'm here, yes.
Hi, John. Thanks very much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about your role as the secretary of the QPR Supporters Club.
Yeah, I'm secretary of the Queen's Park Rangers Loyal Supporters Association, which is the oldest independent supporters association in the country, formed in 1987.
And a little bit about an article, Reclaim Our Game.
Yeah, Reclaim the Game is a book of about 12 editions now. I first wrote it when the Premier League started in 1992. So that's basically trying to reclaim the game for the fans to get fair pricing, force out racism and force out the worst aspects of the big business, which has meant that I think prices have gone up something like 600% since the Premier League started.
Yeah, because John, I read some of it. One of the things you mentioned was the situation where Marlow Estates, that brings Mary Lane, isn't it? 987, and God bless her soul, but Bulstrode, late Mr. Bulstrode, wanted to merge them Fulham and QPR.
Yeah, Fulham Rangers. That's why the LSA was formed, to fight against that, and we built links with Fulham fans as well. So it was to keep the distinct identity. And we saw what happened with Milton Keynes a few years later.
Yeah, because obviously you probably don't remember me, but we had a good chat on the tube getting back from Wood Lane. And
I do remember you.
Now, one of the things you mentioned is that you've built 2 relegation teams. One of the things I want to ask you is, how do you manage that? Who is to blame? Is it the owners or is it coaches like Warnock, Hughes and Mr. Redknapp?
Well, I think that it's like building a fancy house without any foundations. I think at Queen's Park Rangers we need a plan where we build up the youth scheme and do what we used to do as a club, bring in players for a few £1 million. And I mean, Charlie Austin's a prime example of one of our most successful players. He didn't cost a fortune. I think he's still on lower wages than most of the players. We tend to buy players past their sell-by date and still put them on £70,000 or £90,000 a week. And yeah, we spent vast amounts of money building 2 relegation sides. I still hope we don't go down, by the way. I hold out hope until it's mathematically impossible. So, we've got to start by beating Everton on Sunday, I think it is now, because of the Europa League.
Now, how would you explain QPR's inconsistency this season? Obviously, their away form's absolutely shocking, to say the least. You've got players like Tarap within your squad that haven't overly been used. You've got good players within the team. What has gone wrong for QPR this season?
Well, I think we need a certain amount of consistency. I think that, interestingly, I talked about Charlie Austin, but a player who costs very little money, I don't think he's on super wages, Carl Henry, who I'm sure even himself isn't one of the best players in the world, has shown that sort of consistency. There's 4 or 5 players that have shown consistency, but there's some in the side, I don't want to name names, I think most of the fans know that give the impression that they're just mercenaries taking in a big amount of money and giving very little back, to be quite honest.
Yeah, one of the questions, because one of the things we kind of mentioned 2 weeks ago, and I'm just going to mention it again, you've got a debt of nearly 70 million, and yet you have a steel magnet worth billions of pounds, and you've got the boss of AirAsia. How do they manage this sort of mismanagement when you've got men who run big businesses, big successful businesses, and yet they run your club into the ground? I don't understand how this is possible.
Well, I've always raised that in Reclaim the Game, and it doesn't take a genius to work out. I don't think any club should exceed on the wages they pay anything more than 70% of the total income they bring in. And once you start doing that, a club like QPR, no matter who the backers are, once you start going overspending like that, it does create problems. For example, clubs like Southampton built up a youth policy, produced very good players, and that's possible. QPR used to do that. When I first, there was a mixture in the mid-70s, the side that was runners-up in the league, it was a mixture of home-produced players and players that we brought in and developed. So it can be done. I think we pay the 5th highest wages in the country at the moment. It's incredible for a relatively small club like QPR to go down that line. The debt does worry me. It worries me a lot because I think there's a fine outstanding that if we don't pay that, could be all sorts of problems. So yeah.
But, yeah, back to the game and back to the players. Your style of play is a standard. It's like it's a long ball up to Zamora, and then Charlie Austin shoots on sight. And it's what I don't understand is that take Austin out of Queen's Park Rangers, where the goal's going to come from. I don't see anyone putting their hand up in terms of putting a ball in there.
Well, we were absolutely slaughtered at Crystal Palace. No disrespect to Crystal Palace, their 2 wingers were outstanding on the day. And again, Crystal Palace, probably with a squad that's not, in skill terms, not too dissimilar to QPR, are safe from relegation. I feel really sorry for Charlie Austin. He wasn't named in the England squad. He scored only 1 less Premier goal than Harry Kane. And let's be fair, I think Kane's in a slightly better side than QPR. And I think the three other forwards that they picked for the England side have only scored 2 more goals than what Charlie Austin has scored in the Premier League. I think 15 goals for QPR is pretty sensational, actually, I think, for Charlie Austin.
I definitely agree with you.
Definitely. Now, obviously, QPR are 19th. They're 4 points inside the relegation zone with 9 games to go. Do you believe that they can stay up?
Yeah, we're going to win all 9 games. Well, we've got to beat Everton on Sunday. Then it's West Brom away, a relegation. Then it's the three easiest points, Chelsea at home. You've got to believe, haven't you? Come on, you've got to believe. But I think we need as low as 34 points might keep us up. 4 wins might keep us up. But you don't know what the other teams are going to do. Because 1 minute Aston Villa seem dead and buried, then they pick up in form. And Sunderland have brought a new manager in. No, I think the lad taking control of QPR is very good. I think he's brought in some of the young players in. But I think we might rue the fact that Harry Redknapp wasn't dismissed.
Totally agree with you.
Just before Christmas. Now, brought in somebody like Pulis at Christmas, QPR could have been 13th or 14th. Yeah. I think they're a 13th, 14th side. I don't think they are a rock-bottom side. But it gets to a question of confidence. If you keep losing, then that keeps repeating itself. But I think we'll beat Everton. And if we move to 1 point behind the 4th place again, then you're in with a shout. Then you're in with a shout.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, John.
Take care.
Thanks for your views. We'll speak again soon.
I hope you stay up so we can have a little chat again.
Well, yeah, it'd be good to, and I hope the Arsenal were really unlucky during the week, and I hope they lift the FA Cup, mate.
Well, definitely. Hopefully, I might see it at Wembley then.
Well, get me a ticket, I'll come along, yeah.
I'll do my best, mate, John.
Now, keep it for the Arsenal fans. There should be more Arsenal fans over.
Remember, reclaim the game.
Take care.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye. Well, we're going to jump to a quick break now, so join us after this break when we continue our roundup of the week that's been.